Nintendo has done it. The Nintendo Switch 2 is finally official. We got our first look this morning, and my gosh, if you're not excited, I don't know what to tell you. After that reveal trailer, it's so hard to stop my mind from thinking about all the different games that released on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X over the last few years that didn't make it to Nintendo's Switch. But now with Switch 2, it's a possibility that these games could come to Nintendo hardware. Obviously, the majority of people are probably most excited to see what Nintendo's going to offer in terms of new games and potential new third-party releases on Switch 2, myself included. However, I think now is a great time to talk about some of the ports that we might get to see on Switch 2, which would be incredible to play on Nintendo hardware on the go. So, without further ado, here are 14 games that need a Nintendo Switch 2 release. First up, I've got Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. If you've watched Final Weapons Under the Plate series, you'll know I absolutely adore both of these games, and it's incredible to think what this experience could be like playing on Switch. Obviously, Final Fantasy VII Remake is already playable on Steam Deck, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is set to release on PC next week, with the developers hoping to add Steam Deck support around launch. Both of these games are nothing short of incredible. I genuinely believe they're two of the best RPGs we've gotten in decades, and I sincerely hope that Switch 2 players will get a chance to play these masterpiece titles. And really, thinking big picture, having both Remake and Rebirth on Switch 2 could do wonders for the series in terms of sales. It's a win-win situation, and I would instantly rebuy both of these games on Switch 2. The adventures of Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barrett, Red 13, and the rest of the party are just too good to pass up on. I think these two gigantic RPGs would make massive third-party releases, especially around launch, or even in the first year of Switch 2. For my second pick, it's gotta be Elden Ring. Releasing in 2022, Elden Ring is genuinely one of the best games to release in the last few years. Many praise it as one of the best games ever even. Once again, having a game of this caliber on Switch 2, even in the launch year period, would be a major thing for Nintendo fans who might have not checked out the game previously. We have to remember, there's a lot of Switch owners who don't own another console or PC, so the Switch is their main use of hardware. While the Nintendo Switch got Dark Souls remastered, no other title from Software made it over for the Switch's lifecycle. So, Elden Ring feels like the perfect jumping off point. For my third game, it's gotta be Resident Evil 4. Released in 2023, the remake of Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite action games I've ever played. There's just something so satisfying about the remade action combat combined with parrying, dodging, and more. The gunplay is tight, the story is gripping, and my gosh, you just can't beat that atmosphere. Sure, you can make an argument that Capcom made Resident Evil 2, 3, 7, and Village available on Nintendo Switch, but we're not going to count that as an official port considering it's a cloud version, and let's be honest, they're not great. Resident Evil 4 ran perfectly fine on PlayStation 4, and I think the jump to Nintendo Switch 2 makes perfect sense for the series. It's the perfect time to allow Nintendo fans to play the latest mainline entry just before Resident Evil 9 potentially releases sometime in the near future. For our fourth pick, we've got Bloober Team's remake of Silent Hill 2. This one just released in October, but my goodness was it an experience. Sure, it's different from the original, but I don't think Bloober was intentionally trying to recreate that. It was their own take on it with a more modern twist, and I absolutely loved it. It's never going to replace the original, but it's a fantastic horror game that I had a lot of fun with. Obviously, Silent Hill really didn't have a presence on Nintendo Switch, but with Konami recently re-entering the video game space with titles like Silent Hill 2 and the upcoming Metal Gear Solid Delta, Now feels like the perfect time to offer this new game to even more players than at launch. Silent Hill is calling, and I hope we're able to answer that call on Nintendo Switch 2. Our fifth pick goes to none other than Tekken 8. Nintendo Switch has received a plethora of fighting game support, but it really leans more on older games and remastered classics. Granted, we've seen titles like Mortal Kombat 11, Mortal Kombat 1, and Guilty Gear Strive make an appearance on the system, but we never saw games like Tekken 7, Street Fighter V, or any of the last-gen fighting games. So, I really want that corrected with Switch 2, and I think Tekken 8 is a great place to start. I had so much fun playing Tekken 8 last year on my PlayStation 5, and I'm already starting to imagine what it could be like to bring it around with me portably on the Nintendo Switch 2. Bandai has been a very key partner for Nintendo throughout the entirety of the Nintendo Switch's lifecycle, and I think Tekken 8 would fit right at home as a major new third-party title on Switch 2, especially considering that years of DLC are still to come. We've got our first, probably major, surprise in this list. My sixth pick has to be Death Stranding. While this might have seemed borderline impossible a few years ago, Death Stranding actually made its way to Xbox not that long ago. Since it's available on Xbox, there should be no problems at all moving the game to Switch 2. Death Stranding is seriously one of my favorite games of the last decade. It's unlike anything I've ever played, and I still think about the story and everything revolving the gameplay so often. Having that experience on Switch 2 for new players to try out and for returning players to bring portably would be a dream come true. Considering that Death Stranding 2 on the Beach is set to release for PS5 later this year, I think this move makes quite a lot of sense for Kojima, as it can introduce new players to the franchise before the sequel releases. Game 7 is one I know so many people on Nintendo Switch would love to put hundreds of hours into, and that's none other than Final Fantasy XIV. To be honest, it still kind of surprises me that Square didn't make the initiative to bring this to Nintendo Switch. With over 140 million consoles sold, it seems like a goldmine for new players to try out and join the world of FF14. However, that mistake can be rectified, and Switch 2 seems like the perfect time to do it. The hardware concerns should be out of the way at this point, and Square should be able to release new updates in the future on Switch 2 no problem. I think one genre that Nintendo Switch really lacked was MMORPGs, and Final Fantasy XIV is one of the biggest in the world. It's a perfect fit to bring some new life and excitement to Nintendo Switch 2. For Title 8, we've got Cyberpunk 2077. I'm sure this might be a surprise to some, but I promise you this game can easily run on Nintendo Switch 2. The hardware it has on board is more than enough, and DLSS will make up for any areas it lacks. To be honest, I feel like this is a game that many might look at as an impossible port, but I implore you to look back on Nintendo Switch. What game did we receive there that seemed impossible at the time? Witcher 3. And I'll tell you what, that game runs amazingly for the system. I think a port of Cyberpunk 2077 would really showcase just how powerful this system could be for many games out there. And plus, what's not to like about a 100-hour RPG being available on Switch 2? I'm all in. Number 9 is kind of a cheat because it's not just one game, but here I have the Yakuza series. Sega has been one of the biggest supporters of Nintendo Switch for years. Atlus has released countless titles on the system, and we've seen all sorts of games from Sega, including last year's Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. Funny enough, we already have a Yakuza game on Switch in the form of Yakuza Kiwami. That really was a great port, and I'm really excited about the prospect of Sega bringing all of the Like a Dragon games to Nintendo Switch 2. These are seriously some of the most fun games I've encountered in the RPG medium, and I think they just fit right at home on Nintendo Switch too. Just looking at the sheer volume of titles in the series, Sega has 11 Like a Dragon games that could make their way to Nintendo Switch. The company is still releasing brand new games like the upcoming Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii on older consoles like PS4 and Xbox One. I really think bringing these games to Switch 2 isn't gonna be too much of a challenge for Sega. And hey, while we're on the topic, let's bring over Judgment and Lost Judgment 2. And let's make Judgment 3 already. Where is it? For Game 10, we've also got multiple here. Capcom, it's time to complete the Devil May Cry collection on Nintendo Switch. Switch received an incredible port of DMC3 Special Edition with new features that were amazing. It's about time we got Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition and DMC5. Speaking on the latter, Devil May Cry 5 is one of my favorite action games in quite some time, and being able to play that on Switch 2, even just a replay, would be incredible. I think so many Nintendo Switch 2 owners would really appreciate being able to play DMC5 on the go, especially with just how good that combat system is. Number 11 has got to be the Halo Master Chief Collection. The MCC wasn't initially on this list, but a new report claims that Microsoft is looking at bringing the collection to Nintendo Switch 2. This would be an absolute game changer for the Halo franchise, and seriously, this is one of the best collections out there. I cannot stress it enough. There was so much love poured into every piece of the MCC, and I'm sitting here smiling just thinking about the prospect of these games being playable on Nintendo Switch 2. There's no doubt that the online community would ramp up and be extremely active, and I can't even begin to imagine playing these iconic campaigns portably on the go with friends potentially in local co-op. It's really free money, Microsoft, and it's gonna be up to you to make it happen. But I can tell you what, if MCC hits Switch 2, it's going to easily be one of the biggest third-party titles available instantly. For game number 12, Capcom, I need you to bring Street Fighter 6 over. I've spent hundreds of hours playing Street Fighter 6, and it's so much fun. I can only imagine bringing it around with me as I travel. Seeing the series get its first guest fighter in Terry Bogard last fall was an incredible experience, and he's so much fun to play. I'm seriously looking forward to Mai in just a few weeks as well, and I really can't help but wonder what that game could be on Nintendo Switch 2. Once again, just as I previously talked about with Tekken 8, it's about time that current Nintendo hardware got recent and modern fighting games just like PS5 and Xbox Series X. Street Fighter 6 has at minimum another 3 years most likely, and I think a Nintendo Switch 2 port would bring millions of new players into the fold of this incredible modern fighter. Game 13 is one I was honestly a bit surprised skipped out on Switch, and that's Persona 3 Reload. I actually just recently completed this and earned the Platinum on PlayStation 5, and it's a really solid remake. Sure, Persona 3 Portable is available on Switch, but you have to remember just how big of a deal it was to get Persona 5 Royal on Switch hardware. I think Persona 3 Reload would sell incredibly well on Nintendo Switch, and yet again, it adds another massive RPG into the system's library from the get-go. You might not be into Persona, and that's okay, but let me tell you, having one of the biggest RPGs of 2024 available on Switch 2 near launch would be an amazing thing for the system. Let's just hope that Atlus and Sega have some plans in motion. And finally, last but certainly not least, Square, it's time to natively port the Kingdom Hearts series. Kingdom Hearts infamously made its way to Nintendo Switch for the 20th anniversary in the form of cloud ports, which in my opinion and in the opinion of many others were completely unnecessary. Kingdom Hearts 3 aside, there is absolutely no reason that Kingdom Hearts 1.5 plus 2.5 HD Remix and Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue were unable to run natively on Nintendo Switch hardware. With the Nintendo Switch 2 now on the horizon, I think it's time to rectify that mistake. Nobody wants to play a cloud version of these iconic games. It's time to bring the Kingdom Hearts series in full glory to Nintendo Switch 2 natively this time. I know many others like myself would be more than happy to devote hundreds of hours again into replaying these experiences on Switch 2. And maybe it's just me, but I really do feel that Kingdom Hearts 4 will ship on Nintendo Switch 2, making these ports a must for Square Enix to ensure that fans have access to a proper experience of the older titles. And that's gonna do it for my list of 14 games I want to see on Nintendo Switch 2. If you're excited for Switch 2, be sure to hit that subscribe button here at Final Weapon. Whether you're into Nintendo games exclusively, RPGs, action games, or even anime, we've got you covered with all sorts of content coming your way weekly. There are going to be dozens and dozens of games for Nintendo Switch 2 here in the coming months, and I'll tell you what, if you don't want to miss out on any of it, stick right here at Final Weapon. Thank you so much for watching, and let us know down below if there are any games we missed that you'd like to see on Switch 2. We'll catch you next time.